Hey, what's going on, guys? Coach Jacob here. I'm bringing you guys the 5th video in our series of 6, covering those 6 foundational principles for holistic health. The 6 foundational principles are, just as a review, eating, drinking, and sleeping as our yin or more anabolic forces in nature, and then thinking, moving, and breathing as our 3 yang or more catabolic forces in nature, right? So there's the 6, 3 are yin, 3 are yang. Balancing those 6 creates holistic health and vitality for us, right? So today we're going to talk about breathing specifically, one of our catabolic forces. Now, it's classified as a catabolic or yang force because it is something that you have to do, right? It kind of it requires movement and musculature to work for breathing to happen. But breathing can be quite yin or anabolic, as you'll see here. So it's kind of one of the weird ones that it falls into kind of both categories, but just the fact that it does take energy to breathe, that it is classified as one of our catabolic or yang forces or foundational principles. So we're going to talk about how breathing relates to the nervous system. So we have 2 branches of the nervous system. We have the somatic nervous system, which, 2 branches of the peripheral nervous system, I should say. So the somatic branch of the peripheral nervous system is responsible for voluntary movement and for sensing your environment, right? Hearing, seeing, feeling the ground underneath your feet. So that is all somatic nervous system, right? Now, we're going to talk about the autonomic nervous system, which is the other branch of the peripheral nervous system. So autonomic nervous system, what the autonomic nervous system is responsible for is more of those, the systems in your body that are automated, right? So digestion, sneezing, coughing, blood pressure, right? Your heartbeat, things like that are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Basically meaning that they're not consciously controlled by you, right? Those things happen in the background while you carry out your life, right? So the autonomic nervous system is responsible for those automated functions in your body. Now, there are 2 different branches of the autonomic nervous system, right? The parasympathetic nervous system, which relates to our anabolic forces, right? It is responsible for releasing tissue-building hormones like testosterone and HGH. It's responsible for digestion and kind of repairing the body from injury, right? Whereas our sympathetic nervous system is the other branch of the autonomic nervous system, and it relates more to our catabolic forces, right? So mobilizing energy stores, breaking down complex molecules into more simple ones for use. So again, parasympathetic relates to the anabolic forces, and sympathetic relates to the catabolic forces. So you can see that balancing out the tone of these two sides of the nervous system is going to be extremely important for keeping us healthy and vital, right? Now, we're going to talk about how breathing relates to these 2 branches of the nervous system, and how you can practice breathing to make yourself a little bit more parasympathetic and anabolic, because most of us tend to be a little bit too parasympathetic and a little bit too catabolic, which can break down the immune system and things like that. So 3 biggest things that I want to talk about with breathing today: diaphragmatic breathing, your breathing pattern; nose breathing versus mouth breathing, right? And then intentional breathing, how to use breathing to kind of control the nervous system. I will say the one thing about the autonomic nervous system that is, so breathing is the one thing that you can do passively or actively, right? The autonomic nervous system will breathe for you, right? Like, think about when you're sleeping, you don't have to think about breathing, but obviously it happens throughout the night. Or you can be awake and you can purposefully breathe through a certain pattern, right? So breathing is kind of the link between our awareness, our consciousness, and the autonomic nervous system that's controlling all the things in the background, right? So breathing is pretty powerful in that you can control it to change your consciousness and your experience. But let's go ahead and jump into diaphragmatic breathing. What is diaphragmatic breathing? Simply put, it is breathing into your belly, right? Have here 2/3 in the belly, 1/3 in the chest. So when you take a breath in, the first 2/3 of that breath should fill your belly, and only the last third should rise the chest, right? So 2/3 of the breath fills the belly, the last third of that breath moves into the chest. Now, we do that so that we know we're using the diaphragm, which is a respiratory muscle. We get more oxygen in when we expand that belly first, right? And then the third thing is when we breathe into the belly, and we're doing it slowly, it activates the PNS, or the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So that slow diaphragmatic breathing, filling the belly first and keeping the chest kind of relaxed as we breathe, activates the PNS. And along with that, it utilizes respiratory muscles in the correct pattern. Like I talked about, it forces the diaphragm to work, and it lets the muscles in the neck and shoulders relax and take less of the load, right? A lot of us have a lot of tension through our neck because we breathe with our chest all day long, right? And then we're forcing these muscles, these small muscles on our neck, to actually lift the rib cage to create respiration. Whereas we should be kind of keeping those ribs down, right? And letting the breath fill our belly, right? So diaphragmatic breathing will not only activate the parasympathetic nervous system and keep you in a more relaxed and anabolic state, but it'll correctly use the respiratory muscles in the right pattern, so that you're not getting aches and pains that you're not sure where they came from, right? So diaphragmatic breathing, breathing into the belly instead of the chest. Oftentimes when we get caught up breathing shallow into the chest, it can create this sympathetic nervous system tone, which is more catabolic in nature, right? Which can kind of leave you feeling anxious and leave your body kind of stimulated and running high when it doesn't need to be. Just like I said, breathing kind of controls the autonomic nervous system as well as the autonomic nervous system controlling breathing. So if you're breathing into your chest, it can create anxiety, right? Whereas sometimes if you're feeling anxious, you'll notice that your chest breathing, if you're feeling anxious and you decide to actively diaphragmatically breathe, it can start to calm you down, right? So that relationship always works inversely. Now, we have diaphragmatic breathing. Another thing I want to talk about is nose breathing, right? Similar in the benefits to diaphragmatic breathing. Obviously, when we're breathing in through our nose, we want to make sure we're continuing that 2/3 belly and 1/3 chest pattern. So nose breathing over mouth breathing. Why to do it? Number one, your mouth is designed for eating, not breathing, right? So unless you're eating or talking, your lips should probably be closed to prevent anything from the environment getting in there, right? Your nose has hairs and mucus in it to catch those things on the way in. Now, there are also parasympathetic nervous system nerve endings in the nose, right? So the parasympathetic nervous system has nerve endings on the inside of your nose, so that when you breathe in through your nose, those nerve endings are stimulated, right? Which then stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, keeps your heart rate down, keeps you more in a relaxed state, and keeps you more anabolic, right? Which increases your immune function. Now, along with that, the restricted airway of your nose encourages proper diaphragm recruitment, right? So the restriction of the airflow through your nose makes it a little bit harder to get that air in, but it encourages the diaphragm to work correctly, right? So that the diaphragm pulls the air in the way it's supposed to, and again, we can keep a lot of the other muscles in our upper chest and neck kind of relaxed while we breathe. Third biggest reason here, It builds CO2 tolerance for better cardiovascular fitness. So when you are, cranking on the assault bike, or you're on a jog, or you're in an endurance class, and you're huffing and puffing, you've got that feeling of the lack of oxygen, right? Like if you start to hold your breath for a while, you start to get that kind of panicky feeling, right? That feeling actually doesn't come from a lack of oxygen, but it comes from an excess of CO2 in the blood, right? So breathing in through the nose and out through the nose restricts the amount of air that you get in, right? It makes it a little bit more challenging to get air in, but it makes that CO2 and oxygen turnover a little bit slower. But if you can push through a little bit of that discomfort, especially if you can do it while you're working out, it'll build tolerance for CO2, and that will ultimately give you better cardiovascular fitness and health, right? So, important for our patterning to breathe diaphragmatically into the belly and hopefully in through the nose whenever you remember or that you can, right? When I go to bed at night, I typically will put lip tape on, just a specific type of tape that covers your lips. It's kind of perforated so that if if your nose gets clogged for some reason, you can breathe through it. But it just encourages the nose breathing while you sleep, right? Which again relates back to that parasympathetic nervous system and will keep you in a nice, relaxed state while you sleep, help you get a deeper sleep, help you wake up feeling a little bit more refreshed. And it also kind of solidifies that pattern, so throughout your day, you're more encouraged to nose breathe, right? So that's one thing that I do that helps me out with this, because sometimes I forget, right? Now, I want to talk a little bit about intentional breathing, right? Like I said, breathing can control the autonomic nervous system. It's kind of our one link into the autonomic nervous system. So we know throughout the world and in history, there's hundreds, probably thousands of different breathing techniques that have been proposed by people simply to change your state of mind or your state of being or your conscious experience, right? So how can we use breathing as a tool to get us to where we want to go or get us feeling how we would like to feel, right? For me personally, if I'm on my way to work or I've got some sort of presentation or I'm meeting with people and I need to kind of be on and I'm feeling a little bit tired, I will do a little bit of Wim Hof breathing for stimulation. Now Wim Hof, put simply, he says do 30 power breaths, right? So big, full, fast breaths, 30 power breaths, followed by some holds on the inhale, hold with the air in, and holds on the exhale with all the air out, right? So this hyperoxygenates the blood. It can even kind of stimulate an adrenaline response when you're holding your breath with all the air out of your lungs. So holding after an exhale can kind of stimulate your adrenaline a little bit. So just doing that, hyperoxygenating and stimulating that adrenaline a little bit will kind of wake you up and get you feeling a little bit more stimulated or ready to go, right? So that's one tool I use if I'm feeling like I need to get going. And then one tool I will use if I feel like I need to be a little bit more relaxed, say I'm feeling a little bit anxious or a little bit nervous about something, then I will use some box breathing for relaxation, right? And this one obviously is a little bit more slow. So box breathing just means you're going to breathe in for a certain period of time, hold at the top for a certain period of time, breathe out for a certain period of time, and then hold on that exhale for a certain period of time. What I typically use is 4 seconds. So I'll take 4 seconds to breathe in, 4-second hold at the top, 4-second exhale, and then a 4-second hold at the bottom. And I just go through that pattern slowly with the awareness of the counting, right? I try to only think about the counting to 4. And what that does is it calms my mind down, gets me kind of focusing on one thing, and it activates that parasympathetic nervous system, which we talked about, right? So breathing, when it's done passively, hopefully you can build the pattern of diaphragmatic breathing through your nose with practice, right? And that'll keep your passive breathing healthy and helpful for your body. But when you do need, to access that nervous system and kind of take control of it a little bit, then you have that tool as well of breathing for stimulation or breathing for relaxation. So I encourage you to take time to be aware of your breath, to practice it a little bit more, because it is very powerful. And again, it is that kind of that one link between your conscious experience and your autonomic nervous system, which kind of runs things on an automated basis, right? So you can kind of control your outcome through awareness of your breath. Cool. Thank you guys very much for joining me and for tuning in. I hope this is helpful. I hope that you can take some of this information and apply it to your life. Again, my name is Coach Jacob. Thank you guys very much.